The lobby of Hargreave Tower had a particular kind of silence on the morning Owen Callister walked through its front doors. Not the silence of an empty room. The silence of people who had decided, in the space of a breath, that someone did not belong. He was wearing the same canvas jacket he had worn for 11 years, not because he could not afford another, but because it had been with him on the morning he poured the first concrete foundation of this city's waterfront district, and some things you do not replace simply because they have grown soft at the elbows. His boots were clean. His watch was the kind that did not announce itself. He carried no briefcase, only a folded piece of paper in his breast pocket and the quiet of a man who had nothing left to prove. The woman at the front desk glanced up. Her gaze moved from his jacket to his boots to the space slightly above his left shoulder, the way some people look when they have already decided the conversation is not worth having. "Can I help you?" she said. She did not smile. "I'm here for the 9 o'clock, Owen said. She looked at her screen, looked back at him. "The Meridian Group reception? That's right." A pause that lasted just long enough to be intentional. "That event is for registered guests and invited partners." She said it the way someone says a sentence they have rehearsed. Not cruelly, exactly, but without any warmth to soften it. "Do you have a registration confirmation?" Owen reached into the breast pocket of his canvas jacket and placed the folded paper on the desk. She picked it up with 2 fingers, unfolded it. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes shifted slightly. She refolded it and handed it back without a word, then looked at her screen again. "I'll need to verify with our events coordinator," she said, "if you'd like to take a seat." He took a seat. He had taken many seats like this one, in lobbies like this one, over the course of 40 years. He had learned that the quality of a room had nothing to do with the height of its ceilings. The Meridian Group's annual investment reception had been held at Hargreave Tower for 6 consecutive years, which was itself a statement. Hargreave Tower was not simply the tallest building on Halifax Harbor. It was the building that had reshaped what Halifax Harbor meant. Before it, the waterfront had been a tangle of decommissioned piers and rusting light industrial lots that the city had spent 2 decades arguing about. After it, the waterfront was where people came to remember that they lived somewhere worth living. The man who had made that happen was not in the guest register. He had asked, specifically, to be left off it. His name was Owen Callister, and he was 61 years old, and the only people in that lobby who knew him were the ones who had read the small print on the plaque near the east stairwell that almost nobody ever stopped to look at. The events coordinator who eventually appeared was a young man named Spencer who carried his clipboard with both hands and had the look of someone who was perpetually 5 minutes behind schedule. He found Owen on the lobby bench, thanked him with the muted relief of someone who had just averted something he didn't fully understand, and walked him toward the reception hall on the mezzanine level. They passed through the atrium. 3 men in suits turned to look. Their eyes did the same calculation the front desk woman's had, arrived at the same answer, and moved on. Spencer opened the mezzanine door and Owen stepped through. The room was what it always was. A long table of catered food that no one was eating. Clusters of people who had spent their careers learning how to look comfortable in rooms like this one. And the low hum of conversation that was less about what was being said than about being seen to say it. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the harbor. The afternoon light came in at a low angle and lay across the oak floor in long gold strips. Owen stood at the edge of the room for a moment. He was not uncomfortable. He had simply spent enough time in rooms like this to know that the first minutes were always a kind of sorting. People arranging themselves according to invisible hierarchies that would dissolve entirely the moment something unexpected happened. He took a glass of water from a passing tray and moved toward the windows. Her name was Beverly Crane, and she was the regional director of capital partnerships at a firm called Alderton Financial. She was 53, sharp in the way that certain people become sharp when they have had to fight for every room they have ever entered, and she had a way of moving through a reception that made it clear she considered the room an asset to be worked, rather than a place to simply exist in. She noticed Owen within 4 minutes of his arrival. It was impossible not to. He was the only person in the room not performing. "Excuse me," she said, appearing at his elbow with the particular precision of someone who had timed their approach. Her smile was the professional kind, present at the corners of her mouth, not in her eyes. "I don't think we've been introduced." "Beverly Crane, Alderton Financial, Owen," he said. He shook her hand. She waited. He did not add anything. "And which firm are you with, Owen?" "I'm independent." "Investor? Consultant?" "Neither, really." He looked out at the harbor. A container ship was making its slow way past McNabb's Island. "I just like this view." There was a beat. Beverly Crane was not a woman who suffered beats easily. "This is a closed invitation event," she said, still pleasantly, but the pleasantness had acquired a slight edge, the way a voice acquires an edge when the pleasantness is being maintained by deliberate effort. "For registered investment partners of the Meridian Group." "I know," Owen said. "So you are registered?" "I am." She studied him for a moment. His canvas jacket, his watch, the glass of water held in a hand that had clearly done manual work for a long time, even if it wasn't doing it now. "May I ask in what capacity?" Owen turned from the window to look at her. He had gray eyes and the particular steadiness of a man who had long since stopped needing other people's approval to feel settled in his own skin. "I built the building," he said. She laughed. Not unkindly. It was more the laugh of someone who has heard a joke they weren't prepared for and isn't sure yet whether it's funny. "I'm sorry." "Hargreave Tower. I was the lead developer. My firm broke ground in 2009. He paused. "The waterfront district, too. Most of the infrastructure between here and Pier 21. Beverly Crane's smile did not disappear. It rearranged itself into something more careful. That's impressive," she said. "It was a good project," Owen said. He turned back to the window. "The light off the water at this time of day is still the best thing about it." She excused herself shortly after. He watched her go, and then looked back at the harbor and thought about nothing in particular. He had not planned to come. The invitation had arrived 6 weeks earlier, forwarded by his assistant, who had attached a note that said simply, "Think you should go to this one." His assistant had worked with him for 19 years and had in that time learned to write very short notes that meant very large things. Owen had looked at the invitation for 3 days before he responded. He did not like receptions. He did not like the particular combination of formality and pretense that receptions required. But there was something about this one, the building, the view, the particular confluence of people and place that had made the waterfront what it was, that made him think he should at least show up once before he walked away from it entirely. He was, in fact, in the process of stepping back. This was not public knowledge. It would become public knowledge in approximately 6 weeks, when the transaction closed and the quiet sale of his remaining development interests to a consortium of civic foundations was announced. After that, he would be, by the standards of the financial world, retired. By his own standards, he would be free. He had told almost no one, not because he was secretive by nature, though he was private in the way that people become private when they have spent decades building things that other people take credit for, but because he had learned, a long time ago, that the people worth telling already knew, and the people who needed to be told first were usually the ones most interested in what it meant for them. The room shifted around 6:30 when the organizing committee's chair took to the small podium near the north wall and began the formal part of the evening. Owen stayed near the windows. He listened to the remarks about investment and growth and the economic future of Atlantic Canada with the patience of someone who has heard every variation of these remarks for 40 years and has long since stopped expecting them to be interesting. What he did not expect was the door at the far end of the room to open, midway through the third speaker's remarks, and for the room to perform that particular sideways tilt that happens when someone truly unexpected arrives. The man who walked in was 70 years old and moved like someone who had made his peace with the fact that every room he entered would reorganize itself around him. He was accompanied by 2 people who stayed 3 steps behind him at all times. He stopped just inside the door, looked around the room with the unhurried interest of someone reading a familiar landscape, and then, in the absolute silence that had replaced the third speaker's remarks, his gaze found Owen Callister near the windows, and his face changed, not dramatically. A man like Edmund Bryce did not do anything dramatically, but there was an unmistakable shifting of the light in his expression, the way a room changes when someone opens a curtain. He walked across the mezzanine floor. The crowd parted for him in the unconscious way that crowds part for people who have been parting crowds for a long time. He stopped in front of Owen and put out his hand. "Owen Callister," Edmund Bryce said. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Owen took his hand. "Your note said you hoped I would. I say that to a lot of people. You're the only one I meant it about." Edmund Bryce looked at him for a moment, the canvas jacket, the worn boots, the same self-contained composure that had been there the first time they had met on a cold Tuesday morning on the edge of a lot of empty land in 2007. "You look exactly the same. You look older," Owen said. Edmund Bryce laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the kind that arrives without performance. "I am older. So are you. You just haven't started showing it yet." He glanced around the room. "You've been standing here the whole time, haven't you? Just watching. I like the view. You always said that." Edmund looked out at the harbor, then back at Owen. "Do you know how many people in this room have any idea what this building actually is? What it took to make it?" Owen did not answer. "None of them," Edmund said, not unkindly. "They see a room with a good view. They don't see the 11 years. He paused. "I wanted you here tonight because I wanted to say that in front of people who should hear it, even if they don't understand what they're hearing." The room had not recovered its previous composure. When Edmund Bryce crossed a room to greet someone, it meant something, and everyone in the mezzanine knew it and was now engaged in the private project of reassessing what they thought they had understood. Beverly Crane was standing 30 feet away. Owen was aware of her without looking at her directly. He had spent enough years in enough rooms to develop a peripheral understanding of where certain people were at all times. Edmund was saying something about the Harbor Development Trust. There was a chair position, or something adjacent to a chair position, something that would require Owen's particular understanding of how this waterfront had been built and why. Owen was half listening and half watching a seagull make a long level pass across the upper windows. He heard Beverly Crane's voice before he saw her move. She had positioned herself within the orbit of Edmund Bryce's conversation with the smoothness of long practice. "Mr. Bryce," she said with the same professional warmth she had used on Owen an hour earlier. "Beverly Crane, Alderton Financial. We haven't formally met, but I was hoping to have a moment." Edmund Bryce looked at her. His expression did not change. "Mrs. Crane," he said politely. Then he looked back at Owen. "Were you saying you hadn't decided yet about the trust position?" It was not a cruel dismissal. Edmund Bryce did not do cruelty. But it was an answer, and Beverly Crane received it in the way a person receives an answer they did not expect to be as clear as it was. She stepped back. She looked for one unguarded moment at Owen, at the canvas jacket, at the worn boots, at the man she had spent an hour quietly arranging into a category that had just dissolved entirely, and she looked as though she was doing a calculation she had not prepared to do. Owen did not enjoy her discomfort. He had never found that kind of thing satisfying. What he felt, if anything, was a familiar tiredness. The particular exhaustion that comes from spending a lifetime watching people look at the surface of a thing and believe, sincerely, that they have seen all of it. He felt something else, too. Something smaller and quieter. He had spent 11 years on this harbor. He had made decisions in cold site offices and in city hall corridors and in the kind of late-night conversations that never appear in any record. And all of those decisions had accumulated into the floor beneath his feet and the light on the water outside the window, and the particular quality of evening that settled over this part of the city in a way that had not existed before. No one in this room knew that except Edmund Bryce, and Edmund Bryce was 70 years old and had in his own way been here for all of it. That was enough. It had always been enough. The thing he had built did not require him to stand in front of it and be recognized. It stood by itself, which was the only proof a thing ever needed. Edmund stayed for 40 minutes. Before he left, he put a hand briefly on Owen's shoulder, the gesture of a man who does not use physical contact casually, and said quietly, "Don't disappear entirely. Some of us still need to know you're out there." Owen said he would think about the trust position. Edmund said that was more than he had hoped for. After Edmund and his two companions left, the room reorganized itself again, the way rooms do when the gravitational center shifts. Conversations resumed. The caterers brought a second round of the food no one was eating. The evening light off the harbor deepened to amber. Owen stood at the window for a while longer. He was thinking, not about the trust position or the reception or Beverly Crane or any of the mechanics of the evening. He was thinking about a Tuesday morning in November 2007, when the waterfront lot had been empty and cold, and the city had told him, in 8 different ways, that what he was proposing was impossible. He had stood at the edge of that empty lot with his site foreman, a man named George who had worked with him for 20 years and who had the gift of silence that certain excellent people have, and they had looked at the water, and George had said, "What do you see?" And Owen had said, "Tuesday, 15 years from now, people standing where we're standing." Looking at this, George had looked at the water for a while. Then he had said, "Okay then, let's get started." Owen finished his water. He set the glass on the window ledge and buttoned his canvas jacket against the chill that would be waiting outside. He did not say goodbye to anyone. He did not need to. He walked back through the mezzanine, down the stairs, through the atrium with its floors that his crews had poured, and its light fixtures that his designers had specified, and its east wall plaque that almost nobody ever stopped to read, and out through the front doors into the harbor evening. The air smelled of salt and rain on its way. He stood on the steps for a moment and looked back at the building, all of it, the glass and the steel, and the way it held the last light of the day and gave it back to the water, and felt the thing he always felt, which was not pride exactly and not satisfaction exactly, but something older than both of those, something that did not have a clean name. Then he walked to his truck, which was parked 2 blocks away because he had never once taken a reserved space that wasn't his, and he drove home along the harbor road with the windows down, and the city he had helped build moved past him in the dark, lit up and permanent and entirely indifferent to whether he was in it or not, which was, he had decided a long time ago, exactly how it should be.